Oh, yep, you are. So it's actually 03. So if I open up 03, I've taken that same math surface, right, derived by sine and cosine. Delete that off. And what I can do is I can generate a Voronoi cell and map that to my surface. So how we do the mapping of a Voronoi, I'm going to go ahead and do a new document and see if I can get this to work, because this last part is the one that's been giving me some issues lately. So I have to go back and look at it, but I should be able to just copy that from 3 and get it mapped. So I want to show you how to generate the Voronoi pattern so you can do some more organic forms with your sets. So I'm going to do a new document there, and I want to generate a random set of points within a boundary, because I want to drive that random set. So let me see, make sure I got my random set here. So the same way that I go about making constructing a domain set for a range of numbers for x and y values, I need to do the same thing for my number of points. So you kind of see that happening in this segment. So we're going to reconstruct that. So I need first whenever I look at the random function, so I know I'm going to have a random set of points, and I pull that out. It's always looking for a range. So every range needs a beginning domain set. So in this case, I'm going to construct a domain. And I'm going to say that I want my domain to start at some number. So I'll do a number slider, and I'm going to make that an integer. Give it a max value of 124. I just like the number 24. 124, for that matter. Crank that up. And maybe I'll go something a little lighter to start so it doesn't crash my computer. So then that gives me my domain. And if I look at my panel output, basically it's just going to give me 0 through 124 now. So it gives me 0 to 24. And that's my range of values. And then my random set now, if I look at what that's doing for me, is that's giving me a list of values now, or pulling out one single random value. Now if I want a multitude of values from that, I'm going to say that I plug in where it says number. It's asking me for how many values do I want from that range of numbers. So it just picks randomly what they are. And then if I want, if I want to change the random seed, so what's my random variable? When I change that, you're going to see my numbers shift. So it's always going to generate a different random set of numbers for me. Okay. And then I want to make a series of points. So my range is going to be, so that gives me my number set. Now my range of values, let me just double check myself. Yep. Yep. Okay. So then I basically have a list of numbers. Now I need that, to keep it simple, I'm going to map that within a square. So I need to double the number of values I have, and then I need to split that list into half. And then I'm going to take one set for x, and then I'm going to take another set for y, and then that should give me a random set of variable numbers within the boundaries of a 24 by 24 unit square. Right? So to make this number value change, I need to go to the expression by right-clicking expression and telling it that I want number times 2. Now, another easier way to do that, and maybe I'll do this so you don't get lost, I'm just going to multiply that by 2. Because sometimes it's hard to keep track of where people do what on these, because there's so many places you can input values now. So I'm just going to explicitly show you that I'm multiplying by something. And that's going to be my number value B times panel 2. And then that gets pumped into my number. So then that doubles the amount of numbers I have. Okay. And then I'm going to split that list into half. And it doesn't really matter whether or not one's bigger or smaller, because it's always picking just a random set of numbers from that. That's why I can just split the list in half. And then that gives me an A and a B. So that's basically my X and my Y point. Index value. Let's see, what did I put in here? 50. Why did I do 50? Why did I do 50? Split index. So the split index, so it's throwing an error at me, so it's asking for an index value. So it's saying, where do you want me to split that value? So if I really want to be precise with this, I can generate another random number for that split, and then it's really randomized, or I can keep it simple and take this same multiplication and divide, or just always take whatever my multiplying number is and plug that into my index value. And it's always going to split it right in half. And then I can construct a point from that X and Y, that list A to list B. So there we have all my values randomly in X, all the way up to 24 in the X direction, and the same thing with Y. So that's my random number set. And then if I adjust my seed value, it's going to randomly fluctuate those points inside my boundary, or I can increase the number of points inside that boundary. Give it something more of a spread. That was a good spread right there. All right, because I want to avoid where points get closer. You may want it, it's whatever you choose here. Okay, so that's my random number generator and random point generator. There. Now what I can also do is it's simple to do an organic form now, is if I type in Voronoi. Now a Voronoi, what it does is, Voronoi was an old mathematician. He probably looked like Nostradamus or something right now. He had a big long ZZ Top beard. He basically wrote a formula that determines closest boundaries, right? So we pick a random set of points, and then we construct a boundary at the 1/2 distance from the next nearest neighbor point. We generate kind of like fluid dynamic grids based on some Voronoi pattern, or Navier-Stokes was another one to do some of these different random sets for boundaries. Basically, I want to construct my boundary cell now. So I want my rectangle, because I can just easily go ahead and connect my points in, and it's going to give me my closest neighbor. But I don't. It's just going to randomly decide to choose when to stop itself. And you can see that concept of what's happening. It's calculating the distance at all areas to the nearest neighbor, and basically putting a line in between them. It's a pretty intense equation. Luckily for us, it's right there in a component. Gives us a quick organic looking form, and we can fluctuate that with my seed value now. I can get any type of thing, or a dragonfly wing for that matter. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to make this combined into an area, right? So I'm going to take my same values I had for my domain set. So I had my domain end at 24. I want to construct a rectangle for my boundary there. And I could always just right click and make one explicitly, but I always want to have things parametric. So I just construct the rectangle. And then if I need to change it at any time, I can always go back and change it. All right, so I take my rectangle. It's going to sit on the XY plane. And then my X and Y size is just going to be both the same domain end. So that way, no matter what I change my domain set to be, it's going to change the size of my rectangle accordingly and give me the number of values within that. And then that rectangle becomes my boundary plane. Now another thing I can do is if I really wanted to get really organic with it, I believe I can put a radius on this as well. Generally I don't use it. I do something else for the radius determination, but let's see if it works. Yeah, it really doesn't do much. There we go. So I can begin to adjust how cellular that looks. So it kind of begins to look like a worm almost. For this, I don't want it. I want it all to connect. So I'll just crank it up so it's beyond what it is. So that's my Voronoi cell. Okay. Now I want to, instead of making, I need to now, if I were to have, how this works in the Rhino set, if I was going to explicitly do this, I would take a surface and I'm essentially going to take a series of curves, so I'll bake these in. Now they're curves. And I'm going to, the operation I'm going to do is taking, and I want to map these curves to that surface. So I would do curve from objects and apply UV curve. So I select my curves. Same thing we did with our wireframe hatch apply, right? Same operation, where now it's something more that we're going to be even more useful for this, so I can map the curves to that surface. We're going to do that as well now, just do it so it's always automatic whenever I adjust. So I'm going to copy over some functions here. What I want to do is I want to copy my original XYZ, my tutorial 01. I'm going to copy over my math functions for my surface here. So I don't have to make my lofted surface again. I'm going to Control C. And then Control V that in. So now I have my surface built. Turn that on. So there's my surface, and there's the curves that I want to map it to. Let's see if I can get this right this time. Let's see. Turn that off. Okay. So what I need to do, and I'm going to paste in the original one and then work through it with you, because last time it was doing some funny things with me, so I'm not gonna do it the wrong way, Vanya. Yep. Control C, and we'll go back to my Grasshopper tutorial unnamed. I'm going to paste that function in now. So what it's doing is it's basically going to take a set of curves and it's going to construct a bounding box around that curve set. And what that does, and it's really, as I'm working through this and thinking about it, I probably can do this a little differently, and I think that's why it was messing up when I did different surfaces. But I want to give you something that works for everything. But basically the idea is I make a bounding box or a boundary around all of my curves at the same time. And that gives me my outer rectangular boundary. Now, in reality, if I'm defining that as my input curves, right, I take all of this stuff, let me delete that off, and really all of this is just constructing a morphing technology. Right, it's doing a long operation to get it back at something that I think I might already have in my object sets. So we're going to start at where we want to be and then work backwards with it. So I have my surface morph. So surface morph is similar to that apply curve function in Grasshopper. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move this up so I can reference back to it, and we're going to take this and make it better from what I did in the past. So we're going to do the surface morph. And it's looking for, if I do the help file, it's looking for my geometry to deform, right? And it's looking for my reference box. So it's definitely looking for a box. So that's why we're looking for a box. So reference box to map from, and then the surface to map it onto, and then the surface space, and the U extents, and then the domain, V extents, and then the W. So we make it away with not needing the domain. So the first thing that we know we have is the surface map and the geometry. So we can plug both of those in right away, right? So we need my cells are my geometry, and my surface is my loft, and then it's throwing an error. So it's giving me a runtime warning. It says, input parameter reference failed to collect data. Okay, so and it's saying that I need a U, and I need a V, and I need a W. So let me go ahead and see what I did here. So here, I can easily do the U, the V, and the W, okay, by basically interpolating the surface the same way I did before. When I did my diagrid with it, is I interpolated it based on its UV coordinates. So I can do the same thing, and it's a little less intensive. I just right-click and I do interpolate, domain. Let me make sure that's the right one before I go too far on you. Yeah, deconstruct. It's the same one that we did before. So the same way we did the diagrid, we deconstruct our domain into its U and V components. The last time we constructed it, in this case we're deconstructing it. And that's going to be my surface, which is here. And that's going to give me my U and my V, U and my V. Now it's going to say W is failing to collect data. So for that, we're just going to do a range. And I'm going to set my domain to be 0 to 2. And I can put in there so you can see what I put in so you don't get lost when you're going back and looking at this. 0 to 2.0. And actually, I don't even need my range now. I just do this. Make sure I plug that into the W. So now so that covers that. I shouldn't throw it. So the only one not throwing the parameter is now my reference. So when we do an orient command, which we did in the first Grasshopper tutorial, in the orient command, we had to determine, in the spiral staircase, we had to determine the reference direction and the reference points, right? So those reference points, it's the same idea. Now this case, it's actually looking for a box, right? So we need to construct a box around our geometry so that it knows how to morph that box, right? And I believe it's going to want to do a height parameter with it too. So the easiest way to construct a box is to do the bounding box. And this is used in your script for cutting up the slices. Is I make a bounding box around your set, and I array a set of planes between that bounding box and divide it out. So that's the same idea. So you'll have exposure to that as well. Now, how the bounding box works is if I were to connect the lofted surface into it, right, it just makes a box around whatever the most boundaries are. Now, if we did that with our Voronoi cells instead of the thing, I end up with a series of multiple boxes. And that's because this little tag is saying per object. And what I can do is, I don't want it to operate on the object. I want it to operate specifically on the whole thing as itself. So I'm going to union my box. And then I have one full box. So it's basically flattening everything and making it so it's one straight box. And then if I look at my output is my aligned bounding box in world coordinates, and then my bounding box in orientation plane coordinates. So I think I want to use the world coordinates for this. What I can do with that box is also under the surface menu. It's just like we deconstructed points from our surfaces for our panels. We can get the box properties from that. And I can get my center, diagonal, area, volume, and degeneracy, or I can get the corner vertices independently. So I want to do my box corners command, which is box corners, the first one. And that's going to give me my corner A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So for this, really my box has no height because it's planar. I'm going to go ahead and make a point set, or I'm going to construct a point. I know that the 4 corner points, the first 4, A, B, C, D, are the ones that sit in the bottom of the box. And then the E, F, G, and H sit on the top of the box. So I'm just going to make a 4-point surface from that. Or a boundary surface. I'll do a 4-point. So under freeform on the surface menu is a 4-point surface. And I connect corner A to corner B to corner C to corner D. So that gives me my surface. And then I want to then take my surface and I want to give it directionality. So I actually want to extrude up the height of that box. So, and I believe this is where my function was having some issues. So that's 1.0 direction and extrude. And then it does another bounding box around it. Okay. All right, so kind of a long way of doing the box. We can extrude that up because it really wants the, if I extrude this up now, it's going to give me the determination of a box itself. And I probably could get away with just doing it straight without doing this, but we'll try it one way, we'll do it the other way. So there's my surface, and it's going to go in the Z direction. It's going to be 1. And then we make a bounding box from that. My content, I'm going to do it there, and that should then go into my reference, and hopefully, there we go. I got it right that time. I don't know why it didn't work last time. We couldn't figure it out. Everything I did, it didn't work, but this time I did the same stuff and it works. Okay, so that's how we map it to the surface. For this, it's just operational. I can hide that and turn that off. So now I have my geometry, my wrapped curvy surface orientated to whatever that may be. Now the issue with this is we always want to construct straight lines again, right? We always want to make straight lines whenever possible when we're doing architecture or building it or planning on building it. If it were concrete, we could probably figure it out, but still a lot of years out from being efficient to build it that way. Oops. Enabled, and we'll group that. Grouped. Then I want to hide my original cells. So now I can adjust the, if I go back to my random numbers, why am I still seeing my surfaces? Oh, because I baked them in. Delete. There we go. So now on my surface, if I generate or change my random number set, right, it's gonna change how I iterate through that mapping on that surface. And I can adjust the random seed until I get something that looks better on my surface. So really, I do all these background operations to really just do a random, to do as many iterations as I can, so I can pick what I actually want. Okay. Now what I want to do is the last part is I need to actually make geometry out of this. So I have my geometry. What I can do is basically split my surface. So I split my surface. Surface split. So I have my original lofted surface. There. And then my curves should be those. There we go. So if I bake that in, I'll just make sure that now I have individual panel cells. And then what I can do is hide my original geometry, so I don't need that. And I don't need to see my surface any longer. Control A, delete. And now I can take and I can extract the wireframe boundary edges for this. So I'm going to go ahead and do my B-rep wireframe. That's going to give me my B-rep, and it's going to give me my outer edges. And then I can use the pipe command. So I can do a pipe. The pipe's going to make a cylinder all the way around every piece. Or I can do a sweeping of geometry. That's a little more difficult. So we'll just do the pipe for this. Pipe it in, and then give it a radius. And then I have my organic kind of warped funky form surface here. There we go. All right, and again, it's still all parametric. I can adjust the curvature mathematically here. Now every time I change it, it's going to take a little longer to generate new pieces, because now there's a lot more data to process. So every time I move that slider, it's going to take a lot longer. There we go. So that's mapping curves to a surface. So I'm going to save that document as Grasshopper tutorial 03. Yes. That's a lot cleaner version of that. I'll upload it later. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna take a break.